Thanks so much for listening to No Lions Here with me, Big Panda.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to No Lions Here. My name is Big Panda, and I'm a recovering sex addict. Really excited to be back in the studio. Just getting the show going, just trying to stay consistent. Lions Here. My name is Big Panda, and I'm a recovering sex addict. Really excited to be back in the studio. Just getting the show going, just trying to stay consistent with it lately. And so before we jump into my guest for today, which I'm really excited about, we're gonna go ahead and plug the socials. Go check us out on YouTube and Instagram. Those handles are no_lions_here. Check them out. They'll definitely be in the description. Posting daily videos to YouTube. We're trying to stick with once a week, long form videos of every episode, but then every day also trying to post shorts and clips from each episode. So definitely go check those out. Super excited to be in the space and, just learning how to do all of this stuff. This was always the plan. The plan was to always get video going and to get on YouTube. So you know what? We're here. It's scary for me, but I'm here. And so I'm really excited about that. So definitely go check all that stuff out. As always, episodes are on Spotify. I appreciate, no matter how you listen, I really appreciate the support. Today's guest is Matt Gardiner, who is a recovery coach and storywork coach who helps people get out of their stuck stories and manage their addictions to effectively integrate sobriety into their lives. His coaching method focuses on breath awareness, inner dialogue word choice, and reframing the stories you've been attaching to the events of your life. Change your story, change your life. It was an awesome conversation with Matt. We definitely get into some of that inner dialogue word choice and kind of like reframing the stories. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Matt Gardiner. All right. Hey, Matt, how's it going, man? Welcome so much. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and welcome to No Lions Here, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I've been excited for this. Obviously, made the contact through Instagram, the IG. Yep. Which, man, I met a lot of awesome people through Instagram. I imagine it's the same for you. Yeah, it was just another. I'm like, yeah, I'm really excited to do this show. We jammed a little bit about hockey before we started here, yep. And yeah, dude, really excited to be here. So thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. Yeah, you reached out to me on Instagram actually when I gave you a follow. I actually just recently got back on Instagram throughout my recovery over the last 2.5 years. I've been totally off social media.
Oh, okay.
Being a sex addict, there's a lot of triggers out there just in the everyday world with sex and what they sell with everything. So getting back on and realizing that, wow, there's actually a really solid recovery community on these different social medias that can be kind of tricky. But if I fill my algorithm with recovery stuff, well, that's what it's going to give me.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's cool. A cool story. So yeah, it's interesting that you decided to come back. I imagine there was a little bit of hesitancy after a couple-year break. You're like, oof, how's this going to go? So it's really cool that you've made it, work for yourself by the sounds of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it was, a lot of it was, all right, the podcast, I've been doing the podcast for, 2 years now. And I was, it's pretty successful. It's all just been word of mouth. Awesome. And, I was like, I want to go to the next level, right? I want to do video. I want to just keep spreading the word, spreading the message of sexual addiction and recovery. And okay. And I believe that this is the next step for me. So got on, you reached out and I was like, hey, you know what? I looked at you, I looked up your stuff and I was like, hey, come on the show, man. Let's talk some recovery.
Yeah, man. I love it. Let's do it for sure.
Absolutely. So now, so you do your own recovery, you do your own podcast, sorry. Yeah. And are in that space. So tell us a little bit about, what got you into recovery, what was your vice, what was your go-to?
Definitely. Yeah. So it was alcohol. Okay. Definitely.
Yeah.
100%. So I was a really shy kid, right? So growing up, I felt that I'd found this, the magic elixir that I'm sure you've heard people refer to as, or something similar. Yep. That's what I refer to it as. It, I was like, all of a sudden I could have a few drinks and I'm like, oh, now I'm not, nervous to go talk to this girl that I've had a crush on that was paralyzed to talk to. I'm like, oh, now I can go talk to her. Oh, this is wonderful. What great stuff. Where have you been all my life? Right. So that was my introduction into alcohol, was it let me quote unquote be myself, or like allowed my true self, or so I thought, to come to the surface, right? So having these like midnight conversations with people that I thought were so deep, and then of course I forget what they were about the next day and all this sort of thing.
Right.
But I remember the feeling. I remember how getting some of that passion up and out and all this. So I had this idea that alcohol was like my way of finding my true self, which in a sense it was not the way that I thought, right? It had to go a lot deeper and darker than that initial teenage kind of fooling around with it, right? So I am a musician. So when I got into music, I started playing guitar about age 15. So before that, I was definitely like into sports, and I was playing all the different high school sports and in like taekwondo and different things like that. And pretty much as soon as I got into music, that's when I found like marijuana, and alcohol. So then my identity very much shifted into, what I thought the musician and culture would be, right? And so biographies on like Led Zeppelin. I'm like, oh, destroying hotel and getting hammered all the time. That sounds really fun, especially when a 16-year-old angry at the world, teenager Matt is like, yeah, that sounds pretty cool actually, right? So getting as sort of a self-destructive side of me that I thought was cool at the time as well, right? And sort of glorified with different stories of rock and roll bands of the past and such, and even growing up in the 90s, right? Like 90s was pretty I don't know, I guess controversial decade. Like it was all about like offending people, right? It's so different now. Like there's like Jackass was towards the tail end, but I mean there's like all those talk shows like Maury Povich and who was the other guy there? I don't know. I'm drawing a blank on it. Jerry Springer. There we go.
Oh yes.
All right. And all these shows that are like, and like shock jock radio, and like people trying to offend other people. So that's what I grew up in, right? It was a lot of very different than what it's like today. And the beginnings of the internet and so forth. The 96, remember the dial-up internet.
Oh yeah,
right. That
I can still remember that sound. Yeah,
right. Yeah, dude. Yeah, for sure. So that was like that's a little framework of like how I grew up. And by the time I was in my 20s, by that time it's sort of a progressive thing for a lot of people. For me, my story definitely was. Before you know it, I'm drinking every day. By that time, I was doing like psychedelic mushrooms. I'd say like microdosing before it was kind of a thing, right? So I wasn't doing a lot, but I'd do it like 4 or 5 times a week, right? So I was playing in a few bands around town and doing a lot of mushrooms, a lot of drinking, and I was like, oh, this is fun, right? Until it wasn't, and I'd say my late 20s is when it started to really start turning on me. I ended up putting myself in the hospital for acute pancreatitis from overdoing the drinking, and I was in the hospital for 3 days, and it was like the worst pain I'd ever been in. And of course, they couldn't really figure out what it was at first. There's about 8 hours of me just like healed over and like horrible pain, right? And finally, when they could figure out what it was, I got some pain management, and there was like 3 IV bags to rehydrate me. And at that point, I'm like, hey, like, please, like, if I get out of here, I'll never drink again, doing the whole, that thing. I've learned my lesson. And then as I'm walking home, I'm passing 3 liquor stores. It's kind of like the Goldilocks thing. The first liquor store, I'm like, done with you. Second liquor store, I'm like, something in my brain, like the justifying voice of my brain.
Yeah.
Well, that was rye that did that to you, but beer, like nobody ever has problems with beer. I'm like, seems logical. Yeah, I'll give that some thought. And then by the time I got to the 3rd liquor store on my walk home from the hospital, I was like, yeah, I can have some beer. Nobody ever has any issues with beer. Bought a 6-pack of beer. So as I've discharged from the hospital of like seemingly nearly dying, as far as I knew, and just pushing the limits to where, and then obviously going back on my whole prayers to the universe and the God above that, that I believe in. I'll never drink again. I'm picking up a 6-pack, you know what I mean? So that was, that was a big shift for me where I was like, okay, maybe I can't quit as easy as I thought, and, fast forward into my 30s, I ended up having a, just a relationship, kind of go sideways, actually not kind of, take out kind of, it went very sideways. And at that stage, my drinking had really gotten out of control. And I was just depressed. Like, I'm not usually a depressed person, but that was like a low spot in my life. Curiously, though, everything else was leveling up for me in my life. Like, my band had gotten a grant to record a $10,000, professional album. I was getting promoted at work despite my just, being up on 3 hours sleep and being hungover every day, or like still half cut when I woke. So these things are like, again, the justifications I was telling myself, I'm like, I don't really have a problem. I'm still like a high functioning drinker, if anything, but I don't have a problem. You know what I mean? And then finally it was just like, I needed help. I was about to get fired. You know, I was at the stage where I was going to stop showing up for work. You know, I just nothing really, like, I desired really nothing in life at that point. And so I asked for help, and it was like pretty much the exact opposite of what I thought. I thought, you know, my boss, who's this at the time, was this, you know, mixed martial arts fan hunter, like alpha male. I'm like, this guy's gonna think I'm this fucking big pussy. He's gonna tell me you're fired. You're such a disappointment. And it was like the opposite. He was like, he was super like empathetic and like secretive about it. I guess secretive, maybe not the right word, but just like had some discretion about, you know, we told and such. And I was like, my family's going to be so disappointed in me after I admit that I've been, you know, doing way more drinking than they suspected, and they suspected a lot. And it was opposite. You know, my mom came out and helped me like navigate the paperwork so I could still get, you know, 70% of my wages for the 5 weeks I took off, because I was not in the mindset to do that. And very supportive, right? So all these different things that I'm like, and then of course I'm like, well, all my drinking buddies are going to like be so disappointed because like I'm party Matt, you know, I have this identity of this, you know, crazy musician guy. And I'm like, that wasn't true either. They were like happy. They're like, oh, I'm proud of you for like getting help. So all these things that I built up, these stories that I built up in my mind, turned out to not be true. You know, I mean, it's illusions, justifications, I think, that I was really clinging on to. So I was like 3 years sober, or alcohol free, coming out of that sort of like the 5 weeks I took off there. And really got into like self-development. I started going to meetings, like AA meetings, and that really did save my life. The first 8 months I was doing, if not every day, every other day for AA. And then from there, I just started to kind of get more curious out of like, AA is great. I think for myself, initially I needed that rigidity and like, hey, this is how to do things, because at that point I was sort of incapable of making my own choices. I needed somebody to like literally just, okay, you got 12 steps, go to these meetings, you know, there's like everything is like, this is the way to do it.
Yep.
And then from there, I started kind of getting a little bit more curious about like why I was drinking in the first place. Like, why did I have this pattern of avoidance and, you know, escapism for like my entire 20s into my 30s? So from there, I got into like, you know, like Wayne Dyer books and Eckhart Tolle and like being present and, you know, dabbling in, you know, some meditation and yoga and things of that nature, you know, and then, you know, it was my ego that really came to the forefront at one stage. And I thought it was cured. I'm like, you know, I've done enough. I can go back to drinking now with this fresh perspective. You know, it's been 3 years. I don't have a problem anymore because I've proven I don't have a problem. So, you know, egoically, I was like, yeah, I'm cured. I'm good. You know, and it was very much not the case. As soon as I got back into drinking, I tried consciously drinking as far as like moderation. Okay, I'll only drink on weekends, and, you know, doing these other like moderation techniques. I'll only drink if I go out, right? I'll only drink if I gotta keep the alcohol in the garage. Before you know it, I'm like hanging out in the garage all the time. I'm going, what the hell? Why can't I do this? You know, and meanwhile, again, everything's up leveling in my life. I just have no control over this. And I tried for like another 3 years, you know, of this moderation with 0% success rate. And so finally, basically what spurred me into this, you know, this last 4+ years now of alcohol free was, so my dad passed away a couple days before Christmas, 2018, age 66, which to me is like so young.
Yeah.
And he'd been a drinker from his teenage years. So I started seeing him like, man, I'm on the same road as my dad here, you know? And, you know, he'd been retired a year, and I don't know, I think he just wasn't taking care of himself. You know, he stopped walking. Like, he's a big golfer, but he started treating himself to like golf carts. So he wasn't like getting exercise. He took up smoking cigarettes again, which is very weird. He had to quit for years, and just was overindulging with drinking. And then, you know, one thing leads to another, right? So fast forward a couple months from there, it was April of 2019, his celebration of life. And I was driving out to, it's about 8 hours. It's like my hometown. So it's about 8 hours from where I'm living right now in Edmonton.
Okay.
8 hours west. And about halfway through, it's like right in the Canadian Rockies. It's a beautiful spot. And I just remember like I was coming out of this weekend where I was like so hungover. It was this massive party weekend that I'd been on. And, you know, I was up all night doing cocaine and drinking and smoking cigarettes myself and all this nonsense, right? And I was halfway out there driving through this beautiful mountain scenery, and I felt completely empty, like just void of everything. I was like, what the hell is going on with me? so I took out my cell phone and just started trying to verbalize how I was feeling, and really dark feelings were coming up. But at least I was getting some of that energy moving, right? And somewhere along that line there was, I believe in it anyways, like a sort of a spiritual intervention of some kind, where whether that's my dad, or who knows, right? Something happened to me where I just got this like 180 where I was like, okay, like I've got it. I've verbalized how I'm feeling about it. I've been here before. I've been 3 years alcohol free before. Certainly I can do it again. Really snapped into like solution focus, as opposed to like the woe is me and the what the hell am I doing, and the like that whole side of things. So it was just like this immediate shift. And there was something that really touched me that day of like, hey, I can change this. Like I can change this family lineage of like my dad was a heavy drinker, his dad was, his dad's dad, and just like this whole lineage. And like it can and it will stop with me. And yeah, it was just like completely different person after that. I just went into Prince George, British Columbia, where I'm from, for those 3 or 4 days, and I hung out with my older brother. We hadn't been home together in 20 years by that point, and kind of did the little tour of Prince George where we grew up, and just getting out of my environment and getting out of Edmonton and having everything that happened there, paying respects to my dad. And had I not gone out there, maybe we wouldn't be talking today. It's just one of those, like, perfect storms of different things that happened. And yeah, I'm happy to say, since then, I really haven't really looked back. Like I didn't have too much for cravings. I filled my life with enough stuff that it just sort of pushed that need or desire to escape, or well, I shouldn't say avoid, the avoidance thing, which we can talk about later, but definitely the escapism part. It's through alcohol specifically, just sort of left me, which was great. And that's why I do things what I'm doing now, like as far as recovery coaching. To me, a huge part of recovery coaching is like, I don't know if you've heard of like the hero's journey, right? Like you got there's 12 different stages, but like the 3 stages, the 3 phases, if you will. So there's like the threshold, realizing, okay, you can't really go back. Like the veil's been pulled. I can't live the life that I'm living anymore. Yeah. So I was like the driving through the mountains. Act 2 is the dark night of the soul, so to speak. Do all this like inner digging where I was like, okay, what do I have to change about myself? And I'm still doing the inner work as far as why I did it. Like there's definitely layers to that, and it's, trails back to that, still doing that work. And then phase 3, coming out of that, going, okay, I'm a different person now. And it's human nature to, want to show that to somebody, right? It's like, even as a child, you get a new toy, you want to show your friends, right? So like, I've been right. So I feel like I'm at that stage now, where I'm like, hey, like I'm on the other side. I've done this twice now. I've beaten this twice. I guess you could say I didn't necessarily, I give myself credit for beating it twice. And then going back to where people are kind of in that threshold stage where they're like, man, I know I can't keep doing this. I just don't know where to turn or who to turn to. Right. And then I can be the person, hey, I've done this. I can help you through this. I can guide you through this. And it's just, to me, it's such a wonderful part of recovery is to be able to go back and pay it back essentially for all the people that helped me, you know what I mean? And just kind of keep that cycle going. So that's why I do, what I do. I had worked that job previous 22 years. I started when I was 16 years old, and then, resigned in early 2022. So I've been doing full-time coaching for the last little over a year and a half, I guess, at this point, which was really cool to do as well. I felt very much like that, sort of betting on myself and putting some faith in the universe. Like, hey, if these are my intentions, just kind of throwing caution to the wind, like, show, I guess, show me the way, or like, I'm willing to do this. So there was definitely a little bit of faith-based action on that side of things as well. And so that's a big part of my story as well that I, enjoy recounting as well. Cause I know there's a lot of folks out there that are, they hear the great resignation, it's called, the people that are just sort of, especially coming out of COVID, just like, okay, there's more to life than like, a desk job or
the more than like, the rat race. Yeah.
More than the rat race. Well, I shouldn't say anything about desk job, but basically doing a desk job now. Completely different context, and nothing against people that, you know what I mean? But yeah, absolutely. The rat race. I think that's a better way of putting it. Thanks, Alex. So yeah, that's pretty much it, man. Those are like some elements. I'm sure there's enough to go off there for conversation at this point.
Wow, man. That's thank you for sharing all that with me. And thank you for, again, coming on the platform and sharing that with you. It was, the interesting thing is, like, no matter what your addiction or your vice is or what you go to, there's so much that we can all relate to.
Yeah,
That justifying in your head, that praying, if God, if you get me out of this, I will never do this ever again.
totally, man.
Right. And then you get out and you're like, 2 days, however much time passed, and you're like, you know what? I feel pretty good. I think, and just that idea of like, well, things are going well around me. Nothing's wrong. Everything's fine.
Mhm.
You talk about unmanageability. Well, I'm sitting over here getting promoted. I've got relationships. Like, things are going well.
Yeah.
Why just keep it going.
Yep. Oh, 100%, man. Yeah, that was like, I think, the biggest justification for me, and the biggest sort of illusion or lie that I told myself is, the illusion being, the problem drinker is the guy outside the store that I work at that's got the brown paper bag, hanging out, that's got mental issues. That guy's got a problem. I don't have a problem. I'm showing up to work every day. I'm walking by that guy. So, like, I'm doing fine. Like, and there's nothing wrong with me. Right. So, and there, like I say, it's a funny thing, because, like, I don't know how it was for you or some of the other people that you've talked to, but there was a voice that started mentioning that, like, are you sure you got a handle on this? Because I'm starting to think you don't. And I really think that was, like, somewhere from deep inside, like, and there's a bit of, like, my mom or like my brother or something. I'm like, that's a little bit of their voice showing up in my head for sure. Yeah, no, there was definitely, like, the further along I got, and it was all, all party and it's fun. It's kind of whatever. It's accepted that, like, in early 20s, you're drinking until you're blacked out and such. It's kind of funny, right? It's like a rite of passage almost in some cultures, in Canadian culture a bit, and and then all of a sudden it's like, the older you get, it's like not as cool, you know what I mean? And the other thing too, like, the whole musician part of it is like, it's one of the only jobs that I've seen where you get, like, encouraged to drink on the job. Show up, I'm getting paid as the entertainment for that night. And upon arrival, they're like, here, have some beer. I'm like, okay, sounds good. You know what I mean? So there was definitely some of that. And honestly, dude, back to, like, the 90s thing, like, when I first started at my job, it was still like the Wild West a bit, it was like, people were, like, drinking at work, you know what I mean? And I won't say any names or whatever, but, like, yeah, I remember just, like, there'd be like on holidays, there'd be like the 2.6 of rye in the deli cooler or whatever, right? And I'm like, this is how the real world is. What? You know what I mean? Just like things like that, where it's just so, it's a little bit of, like, conditioned into it and all that. And so I'm certainly not victimizing myself. That's just the way that it was. And I made my own decisions. But yeah, it's like, it's curious to look back on it, right? And just it's interesting for sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You bring up a good point there around, like, being a musician, wanting to be a rock star. Because I know that growing up, like, I, like, idealize, like, performers, or, like, I'm really big into, like, mafia stuff, like mob stories and, like, the Sopranos, like, really, really big into that, and always wanted to be, like, some kind of performer. And I look back on it now, and for me, I wanted that control. Oh, wow, these people they've got the money, they got the power, they got the girls, like, wow, that's why I want that life, because they have all of this control, right? And our addictions are all about control and trying to gain control. So for me, looking back on it now, it's like, oh, wow, like, that's why I was really into those kind of lifestyles, because it came with power and control, and that you could have anybody that you wanted.
Yeah, right. Wow. Yeah, that's a really good reflection. So yeah, if I were to look back on, like, why I did it, and that's what I kind of hinted towards, like, the distraction part, I think that was part of it. It's like that coming out of my, in my recovery, obviously there's still some patterns that, that I'd been, like, pushing away or avoiding or escaping. And I think the number one pattern for me was just, like, it's very similar to, like, as far as like the broad strokes of control, is, like, being able to change my state very quickly. And I do it now through, like, distraction, right? So, and I'm sure a lot of people similar. It's so easy to distract yourself.
Yes.
Right. Pick this guy up. You know what I mean? And just, like, okay, if I'm starting to feel, like, a little bit lonely or, like, less than, I'm like, well, let's let's check my emails today. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I just really noticed I was even doing that for like, until I would say like even the last year, I've like kind of been able to step back from it a bit and be like, okay, interesting. Yeah. Cause every time I'm getting that done, I'm like, no, like, you know, you don't have to feel, I'm telling myself this, like, you don't have to feel that way. Like, just, you'll feel more worthwhile if you see who texted you or whatnot. And then meanwhile, if nobody texted me, like, oh shit, like, what do I do now? You know? So it was like these like really weird patterns of trying to distract myself out of feeling certain feelings. And the certain feelings are feelings that I judge as, I guess, negative. And now realizing it's not negative. There's no, you know, there's no hierarchy of emotions. They're emotions, right? So as soon as I start to judge emotions, then all of a sudden there's like shame and guilt attached to them. And all of a sudden there's like, you know what I mean? If I'm having an quote unquote off day, or if I'm feeling lonely, and then I start like feeling guilty about it, or you know what I mean, or feeling some shame about it, or just like, oh no, snap out of it, like that whole like bypassing kind of inner dialogue that you know, that I used to have, quite frankly. Man, it just accumulates, and you know, I think there still is an accumulation, regardless of like how much, you know, inner work that I have been doing. You know, that's, you know, it's still just like, I'm just peeling back, right? It's almost a stage where like I don't necessarily know where it came from. And also realizing I don't necessarily need to know where it came from either. It's in there. I'm feeling it. So it's valid. And sometimes it's just like to be a present for those feelings that are coming up and allowing it, you know what I mean? Which I never understood. I'd never done that before. It was always like, hey, no, turn away from it. Right. And now
that's
like,
bad. That's negative.
Yes.
Turn away from it. Shove that down. Don't show that.
Totally, man. And now it's just like, no, I say to myself, you're allowed to feel like lonely. You're allowed to feel this way. And then just allow that, you know, that tingly feeling on like the right side of my heart to be there, you know. And this is, you know, I got my eyes closed at this stage, like doing some meditation and just being curious and just like asking it and just like allowing it to be, instead of like mentally trying to be like, hey, that came from my 5 years old when, you know, Steven stole my Lego set, you know. That's like taking away from me. It just wants to be acknowledged, you know what I mean? That feeling. And I found that I've been able to, by just allowing it to be there and like finally acknowledging it, as opposed to like shoving it down or doing something else with it, that being the energy in my body, it's made such a huge difference. And oftentimes it just kind of goes away. You know what I mean? Imagine that, you know what I mean? You give it the attention that it needs and deserves, and the love that it needs. And it's like, okay, I've been seen now. Okay, well, great. You know, bye. You know, it's like, okay, why did I take 20 years to do that? Right?
Sometimes some of these things seem like so simple, right? Like, and I'm like, oh, what? Like talking about my feelings. And you brought up a really good point there around like, because I know for a definitely a good stretch of my recovery, it was like, all right, these things came up. Okay, right. Like a situation came up that would trigger a trauma response. And okay, so it's not actually the situation. Okay, now let me grab my shovel off my back, shing, pull it out of the sheath, and let me start digging, and let me get down to whatever's causing that. And that when I can get down, the thinking was, when I can get down to what's causing that, I can then find the solution. And so many times I never found it. And it was, I always tell people the comparison is like, I'm trying to go off-road mudding with race slicks on.
Right.
And I'm just spinning my tires. And then here I am trying to be present and acknowledge what's going on with me. But yet I'm just getting so frustrated with myself because I can't figure it out.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a really good analogy. And that's the thing. Sometimes I think more often than not, you don't have to figure it out. You figuring it out, or me trying to figure it out, is getting in the way of me just allowing that to surface and go up and out, if you know what I mean. It's like it's coming up and out, and like, hold on a second, I gotta like inspect you, and we gotta like talk about this before you leave, and before you know it, it just kind of goes back down, and you know what I mean. So yeah, it's a really good point. I love the analogy. That's really well done.
And the distraction part of it, man, like I've talked about this on here before. Like, you know, people talk about being workaholics. I'm a distractaholic. Like I could give a master class college course
Yeah.
on distractions and how to just stay, running from things. And, it's funny because, because I'm like in recovery, I'm like, okay, well, I'm not looking at porn. Because I'm also a cocaine addict as well. So
Mhm.
like, I'm not using coke. I'm not looking at porn, but man, I am off. Well, it's because I'm just sitting here still running around, distracting myself and not taking the time to actually like sit with myself, sit with my feelings, and like let those things come to the surface and give them the attention and love like you were talking about, so that they can then, express themselves essentially.
Yeah, totally, dude. And you know what? Like, I think it sounds like we're one and the same that way. Like, I'm so used to my previous job, there was a lot of like fragmented, like intermittent little task jumping work. Like I had my work phone, I had my cell phone. Both of them were constantly going off. There's emails to attend to. There's like, I was assistant store manager at a grocery store, right? So, and then there'd be like, okay, somebody wants to talk to you down at the till. Then you got to cover somebody's break. And then there's like you know what I mean? It was just like this fragmented. So that was like 6 years of doing that. So I'm honestly like, for me, when I started doing work for myself, that's the mentality. And that's like, just because that's what I've been doing, so I needed some kind of common ground for myself to find out, or to follow, like some kind of structure to follow. And that's what I did. So I was just like booking calls left, right, and center. You know what I mean? Like making sure that I'm super busy. I'm working these like 17-hour days because that's what entrepreneurs do. Meanwhile, I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing at this stage, but I'm just working and working. And then I'm wondering, like, why am I still miserable? I just left the job that I'm miserable. And then that was like the stark truth is like, shit, I gotta look at myself now. I can't blame my job. Like I am my boss. And then meanwhile, I'm running the same programs as the same inner dialogue, the way that my bosses that I didn't necessarily care for, the way that they managed with like fear-based, like, oh, it's got to get done, the pressure management. I'm doing that to myself because that's what you know what I mean? That's like, I took that on, and all of a sudden I'm being like my own boss with that same style of management. Like, no, this has to get done by the end. You can't leave this computer till it's done. And it's just like, dude, it took a while for me to like, okay, again, just taking that step back, realizing that like, okay, I understand where that came from. And I think that's like one of the key ingredients that people forget when they get into self-development is like, people will learn why they do something and they're like, oh, perfect. And they just leave it there. But I'm like, okay, no, now you have that awareness. So what are you going to do? You know what I mean? Looks like I may have paused on you there for a sec.
Oh, you're good.
Oh, good. Okay. You did a freeze frame on mine.
You're running.
Yeah, right on. Okay, awesome. So yeah, that's kind of like another thing which is worth mentioning. There's a lot of people that'll be like, oh, perfect. Now I know why I do that. And then leave it there. And it's like, okay, no, do the next step further. Like you've been curious to that stage. You're like, don't you want to know like what life will be like if you go on the other side of that, what you just found out about yourself? So that's another cool topic to jam on a bit too.
Oh, 100%. And I think that, a lot of people in recovery, I want to stop doing or giving into these certain behaviors, right? And like there's a lot of emphasis on like sobriety. And okay, and it's great to be sober. That's awesome. But like let's take that further though. And I think that there are a lot of people that are just happy with like, okay, I'm not, but at the same time, like not going any further or peeling back any more of the onion to really understand and realize like who you are as a person, right? Like, cause I can get sober and not use coke, not look at porn, not act out sexually. But if I'm not doing any of that inner work to figure out who I am, like I'm eventually going to fall back into that routine.
100%, man. Yeah. Yeah, you nailed it. That's like, there's a really good Gabor Mate quote. It's like, if you like, the addiction is the secondary problem that ends up getting a lot of the energy. And then the primary problem is, why did you have that addictive behavior in the first place? So exactly. I mean, just to sort of piggyback on what your thought there is, just like, absolutely. If you're giving all your thought and all your, structure, granted, like there is something, I think, at the triage, like that initial recovery stage, right? The sobriety is like, yes, you got to get the beer out of the hand. Yes, you got to get the porn off the computer. Yes. You got to get the coke. You know what I mean? Totally get that. But then
100.
from there, what are you going to do? Because
Yep.
like, you know what I mean? Otherwise, like, it's exactly what you're just saying. It's like what we say in, the recovery for alcoholism is like the dry drunk. You're still exhibiting all the behaviors that you did as a drinker, but you're just not drinking. You're still being a dick, right? You're still like judging people, you know what I mean? And all this other stuff. And it's just like, man, so like, I don't know, what good is it really doing? Of course, you're not banging up your body, but you're still, as a person, you haven't developed. And it's just, that's kind of strange to me. That's a good topic as well.
It is. And I love that, like, trauma-based addiction is now a model. And I know that model's only been around for 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
And I know that was my introduction to recovery. I went to a Begin Again Institute in Boulder, Colorado, which was, their model was trauma-induced sexual addiction.
Okay.
And so, and I knew that there was sexual abuse, sexual molestation in my house growing up. And I always knew, like, okay, that was there. And that's probably why I was introduced to sex at a very early age. And okay, that's probably why I turned into a sex addict. When in reality, like, there were so many more little trauma teas that occurred in my life that's what basically they all piled up and turned into this mountain. And then realizing that, like, okay, this was just an early coping mechanism. This my brain adapted to, like, help me survive.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, all right. So it's like, it's just, it runs so deep.
Yeah, man. It sounds like I admire the amount of work that you've done just from hearing from a conversation like that. You've and just the nature of our conversations here. Like, you can tell that you've done some deep thinking and deep work about it. So, I admire that about you. And dude, it's exactly right. Yeah, the traumas that come up, and I'm sure you talk about it on your show, but like the small T traumas, right? Where it's just like, there's some judgment that comes on with a lot of those and I hear it from other clients or even myself, where it's just like, that wasn't that big a deal though. Like, you know what I mean? But yeah, like you say, they all accumulate, and it was to you at that time, right? If you're a young kid and you were just like rejected in some fashion, and it, like, looking back on it, or to verbalize it, doesn't sound like a big deal. Back then it was, right? Or if like a parent does something to you, and it seems like somewhat trivial, it's not. Like, it was like, to you back when you're 5 years old or 6 years old, that was like life and death, right? Because that's your provider. You can't just walk out and, provide for yourself at that point. So if you're getting rejected by one of your parents, that's like life and death at that point. So that stays in your body. And then that echoes into your teenage years, your adult years. It gets reinforced by like similar, behavior that you don't realize you're attracting, because like you're modeled by your parents, right? And then you're getting into relationships with that sort of expectations of like conditional relationships, and then before you know it, you're an adult and you're 30 or 40 and looking back, oh shit, like my life isn't going as smooth as I, would like it to. And then, here we are talking about it,
And laughing about it too, Matt.
And
like,
laughing about it. Yeah.
That's what I love about these kinds of conversations, is that we are talking about heavy, heavy things in a very lighthearted way, and that we are able to look back on our stories and kind of laugh at the ridiculousness that, like, we were partaking in.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think it's really special.
I love it, man. And that's why I always love, sorry, I hope you finish your thought there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I always love talking to other recovery folk for that reason. Like, that was a big thing for me, and I alluded to it as far as like when I first started going to AA. It was like the initial, like, so like I was drinking on Tuesday morning, but I was all like secretive and like shameful about it. And then the person would be like, "Oh man, that was like every day for me." And then we start laughing. I was like, "Oh shit, okay, I get it." So it was like this idea, like, what was my like most shameful moment that I was so secretive of. I could reveal it to somebody, they could reflect it back to me, be like, no, like, I've been there, it's all good. Like, and then, like you say, there's a little bit of humor, and it's like, instead of, there's either crying is a great release as well. And then laughing, right? So turning it into some laughter, that's where you can have like that common ground. I find also with like recovery people, just the need for my persona completely just like removes. I'm trying to integrate it so like I don't really have a persona, which can be very hard to do, right? But over time, it's getting there. But yeah, that whole stage of just like, man, being able to laugh about it. And like you say, it's with dark stuff, so perhaps a bit of dark humor, sure. But it's a release, right? It's just like crying's a release, so is laughter. So that was huge for me. It was like to realize I'm not alone in this, A, and B, you can laugh at yourself. There's something about like there's a quote about like if you can laugh at the devil, or if you laugh at a bully, they go away, right? So it was just like that little devil in my brain. All of a sudden I'm kind of like laughing about that stuff. It doesn't have the same control over me anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You reminded me there of something my sponsor told me back earlier on in recovery about that whole oh, hey, I drank on Tuesday morning. And then the other person was like, oh yeah, man, I've done that before. Like the idea of like, we are not unique. Right. Like, and when my sponsor told me that, man, I'll tell you what, man, I was like, oh, like I didn't know how to take it.
Yeah.
But now reflecting back on that, over the period of time, it's like he's absolutely right. Like I'm not unique. I'm not alone in any of the things. Sure, my behaviors may look a little different than somebody else's, but what's underneath is all the same, and all we can all relate to it. So like, yeah, like I am unique, but I'm also not unique at all. Like
totally.
Especially when it comes to my addictions.
Yeah, and there's something comforting about that, isn't there? It's like you say, it's very much, it's the broad strokes are so similar, and that's like one of the most, it just hits me in the heart when I'm hearing people's stories. And it could be somebody across the world, like South Africa or wherever, Australia. It's like, oh man, we got very similar stories where they just like we're connected in the heart. And then, like you say, there's like nuances. Okay, well, yes, you live across the world. Maybe you didn't have, slight little changes, like you didn't have divorced parents, yada, yada. Like if you get really granular, of course, you can find a ton of differences, but the actual broad strokes of the mechanics of addiction, and recovery for that matter, are very strong. And yeah, that's why it's like such an important thing to have, community, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And then community. And I just love other people's perspectives. Like
totally, dude. Yeah.
I love just hearing other people's stories. I love hearing what works for other people because, it's, hey, maybe it'll work for me. Maybe it won't. I can try it.
Yep.
And that's another beauty of the program is like nobody's recovery like really looks the same. What works for you may not work for me. We say this all the time. But yet if I can just get as many perspectives as I can, I'm going to figure out what's going to work for me.
Totally, dude. That's a couple of great topics that's come out of that last phrase you said, like, because like we talked about the nuance of just people's lives. I'm finding that too with just in recovery coaching. Like I look at it as the same thing as as like a personal trainer would for taking somebody to the gym. Like everybody's a little bit different, right? It's like, so you're really going to customize and meet that person where they are as far as what their needs are and what they're looking to do as well, their goals. So, I think we can get just that nuanced in recovery coaching as well, right? As opposed to, and we go again back and again, nothing like the 12 steps and the sponsors and all that. It's great, especially at the beginning stages. But when you're talking about when you're getting into is sort of like the sober now what, and we kind of alluded to it earlier, like you're a year in, you've got through that first year. Sometimes it can be a little anticlimactic. You're like, okay, I got through all those different instances where I normally would have turned to drugs or porn or alcohol. And it's kind of like, okay, now what? So from there, it's just like, yes, exactly. So you've got the foundation built. You've had a year of sober, a year away from the drugs, the alcohol, the whatever it is. So now what do you want to do with your life? You know what I mean? So, and that's where you can get really nuanced with it. And it's, it's a really cool thing. So I like that. There's something else that came that I want to just discuss. I already forgot what it was though, but I'm sure it'll come back up.
As soon as it comes back up, man, just let me know.
Yeah, will do.
Because you brought up something there that I really like is like, meeting people where they're at. Yeah. And I know for me, that is how I want to be approached. That is how I like to be talked to. I love my sponsor because that's exactly what he does. There's plenty of people in the program that are thumpers. You're doing this wrong. You're doing this wrong. And it's like, well, like that just makes me want to pull away and basically go isolate. Like, instead of like that's, and so I'm really big on that when I get phone calls from people, like I want to meet you where you're at because I know that works for me.
Yeah.
So if I can do that to you, and that's as human beings, like I want to be heard.
Yes.
And if you can't meet me where I'm at, well, then you're really not hearing me. And sometimes that's all that I really need is just to be heard. Hence why I went out and started a podcast.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Getting back to the control thing too, right? Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So cool. That's so cool. Yeah, and like, I guess that's the difference, right? Is like, yeah, it's like what you need, because like some people need the certainty of that program, and perhaps that's what they're going to do the rest of their lives. You know, people are in AA for 30, 40 years, for example. And other people like myself, I did it for 8 or 9 months. I got that stability, that certainty, that binary, okay, this is the right way. This is, how you're going to stay away from alcohol. And from there, I butted into many different modalities, right? And there's so many of them now. They're a lot more present. And, with recovery, even just being so much more, I guess, commonplace, which is amazing. When we talked about Instagram, like it's got an amazing recovery community for all vices, as does, TikTok and like all these different places, Facebook groups. So, from there, I mean, man, you can really customize and dial in and figure out things that work for you, right? Because it's like, the law of conservation of energy, you can't destroy or create it. You can only, basically convert it into something else. So for me, I know I spent a lot of extra energy, like getting over on people and myself, and you know what I mean? Trying to organize when I could drink and who I could talk to and when, and all this kind of rubbish. And so I had all this extra energy, like, because I thought I was good at it. I mean, verdicts out on that, perhaps. But either way, I was spending a lot of energy and a lot of time and a lot of thought, bandwidth going to like my addiction. So remove that. You want to do something as quickly as possible to, move some extra curricular things that were on, for me, it was like things that were on my periphery. So like I always wanted to start going back to the gym and getting back into like being active and exercise. And clearly that clashes with drinking. It just really didn't work. I tried going to the gym after a few beers. Terrible idea. So as soon as I got out of that, it's like, okay, I'm going to the gym now. And yeah, again, back to like the whole, like, well, don't just replace a habit with another habit. I think there's some credence to that, as far as, yes, you still will have to, you don't want to bypass like the emotional side of it. Right. But I think it's also very important that you do find something as quickly as you can that's healthier habit. And it can be whatever it is, right? As long as it's healthier than what you were doing before. Yep. And then from there, you're just like, you're taking up that energy and you're just like marginalized or pushed aside and completely changed like the habits of it, right? You got to identify as like, I'm a non-drinker now. So what are the habits that a non-drinker does? And then from there, there's like the beliefs that build up, the evidence that builds up. And it's like this triangle, it all feeds into each other. And that's sort of, that's how I got success from it anyways. And that's sort of how I teach other or guide other people to do it as well.
Yeah. Wow. That's, I like, that replacing old habits with new habits. Yeah. I think that's great. And it's also like a tremendous balancing act.
Right.
Because, right. Like I'm very black and white, very extreme. I mean, I'm an addict. Like it's all or nothing. Right? I find 100%. Like, all right, let's dive into this. Well, then I'll get like burnt out on it and be like, well, why didn't that stick? I was really into that. Yeah. Oh, well, because I had no balance with it.
Yes.
Right. I wasn't integrating it into my life in a balanced way to where I just do something until I get burnt out. And then I'm like, well, okay, well, I'm done with that.
Yeah.
Instead of, healthily trying to, and it's a process, right? Like
it is
process and it's a learning experience. Me and my sponsor talk a lot about like, okay, well, you're going to have an experience with that. You're going to have an experience from that. Love and, that. You're going to be able to look back. Okay, what can I take from that experience? What can I learn from that experience? And what can I do differently because I had that experience moving forward?
Dude, I love that. Such great advice. Yeah, such great advice. That gets into like the whole, recovery being it's a journey, right? It's as opposed to destinations. I think it's safe to say you and I are both I'll speak for myself anyways. I was very destination based. I was like, okay, after work's done, I got my fucking couple hours to drink, and everything was like getting to the next thing, right? And then that's how I lived my life. So now I'm hearing from what you're saying is like, and it's so true. It's like live for the experiences. You're going to experience this. And then from that, there's going to be byproducts of, of different, like, landmark events that have happened, or like, okay, I can learn from that. You can put your flagpole in there, be like, hey, I learned something from that. open to the experience and the journey versus the destination, like in a race to get somewhere, and then get that the dopamine thing, the anticipation of getting there, and then when you get there, it's kind of like
yes,
what's next? You know what I mean? So just and then that gets back to the whole distraction pattern that I have too. That fits in there so beautifully as well, right? Because there's a lot of times I'm uncomfortable in the moment that I'm in. So I'm like going to distract myself by, okay, but like in an hour, I'll be doing this. Let's like read about, you know what I mean? So yeah, it all factors in, but yeah, I love that advice. It's such great advice. It's just like realizing, yeah. And it's like, stepping back again from like that addict side of just like extremes. Everything's got to be fucking out of 10. No, it doesn't. In fact, it's going to be great if you can just temper things, right? And let things happen, be collaborative with what the universe is going to give you instead of that control thing. Like, no, I got to micromanage everything and I'm going to control this experience, right? Just let the experience collaborate with you.
Yeah. And you made a really good point there. Cause when you do get to the destination, you're looking around going, well, okay, well, I guess, all right, well, what's the next destination then?
Right?
Like, and how do I get there? And how do I leapfrog these valleys that are in my way?
Yep.
To get to that next destination. I talked about this on the last episode of like, I don't like what my life looks like right now. I'm taking actions around setting myself up, with the podcast and recovery coaching, but like I want it so many times. I'm like, I want it right now. Right. I want my life to look differently. Okay. How do I, and then my brain goes into problem solve mode. Okay. Well, how do I get there right now? And leapfrog everything instead of like going through it, having these experiences, because that's where the growth. Someone told me once, like, and this was before I was in recovery, so it didn't really make any sense to me at the time, was like, the dream is the process.
Ooh, yeah.
And it's like, okay, like I get that, right? Like the dream is like going through the process and what we get and learn from the process that gets us to where we want to be.
I love that.
And I so many times can get lost and not remember those things.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a lot. Yeah, dude. Again, that's a great quote. I think a lot of it's just like, for me anyways, it's like just conditioning, right? There's, after 22 years of the same job where I started as part-time closer and up all the way up to assistant store manager, that was work to me. So everything was very much like, hey, this is done. What's next? And just boom, boom, boom. So, there's a degree of that. And then it's reflected in our like North American culture, I would say, specifically like in the States and Canada, of like, the grinder culture, which I think is finally starting to get some like, rejection, like, hey, like enough of this, you know what I mean? It's nonsense, right? Don't get me wrong. Like there's a pendulum there. There's like, there's part of me that was worried, okay, if I'm not doing this grinding thing, I'm just going to end up on the couch eating Cheetos and go back to drinking.
Yep.
That's the pendulum thing. There's something very much in the happy medium in there. And I think that has a lot to do with what you're talking about, is just like immersing yourself in the experiences, realizing and being fine with that, realizing that some days might feel like you've plateaued. Some days you might feel like you've gone a step, backwards, and being okay with that and realizing it's not really about that. It's you staying the course and staying present, as opposed to just like you say, trying to jump a few steps or whatnot, or getting frustrated with where you currently are because you egoically think that you should be further along. When if you were talking to some of your guides or, the universe itself, would be like, no, you are exactly where you need to be. And I'll take it one step further. I think every time that I've ever had any like, feelings like that, I can reflect back on even 6 months to a year from then and go, no, that totally made sense. Why I was there and why I was like, in, purgatory of some kind, or so I thought. I'm like, no, like had I not been in there, I wouldn't have learned that lesson, and that wouldn't have led to this, which was, it's so easy to look back on it and go, oh, that totally makes sense now. I don't know. Do you have that as well?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Like 100%, like looking back being like, wow, I'm really glad that I went through that. One of the biggest things that I look back on is like, I survived.
Yes.
Right. Like realizing that like the feelings that I was feeling growing up, like I thought that they were physical threats on my life.
Mm-hmm.
And realizing, and that's kind of like where the title for the podcast, No Lions Here. right? Like there's no physical, I'm not in any physical danger.
Yeah.
Like I am okay. Even some of the worst situations that brought up just heavy, deep, dark feelings,
Mhm.
looking back on those times and being like, okay, like I survived that. Okay. All right. I survived and I'm actually thriving on the other side of that. There's so
Mm.
many times where I don't acknowledge the great things that I have going on. It's that like that 99 to 1 syndrome.
Yeah.
That like, you know, I've got 99 amazing things going on in my life that I'm taking action around, and I'm present, and I'm building relationships and doing all these wonderful things. Oh, but this girl that I like didn't text me back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ah, man.
Yeah.
And then I can just all this energy and time goes into just dwelling on that one thing,
Mhm.
opposed to like the 99 amazing things that I have going on in my life.
Totally, man. Yeah, and it's like even that fact that you have that awareness, and like you even saying that. I mean, yeah, same thing, right? I'll have like everything's going great. My morning was going great. For whatever reason, my cell phone today was like dropping Wi-Fi all the time. I'm like, why isn't this working? And like, is this even really like? It's not even a big deal. Like I have roaming, it's still working. But yeah, that's what my brain was, and I think that there is part of the human brain that's just like loves to problem solve. I think ego wants problems to solve. So it's like my ego comes up and he's like, well, yeah, you know, like it's my, I guess just the lesser side of me in a lot of ways that wants to and like it almost like creates problems for myself too. Like the ego side of me creates problems because it wants to be able to then solve those problems, right?
Yes.
Whereas like you say, like the 99%, that's where you can make the shift, or where I make the shift is like, yeah, take a few deep breaths, think of like even 2 of those 99 things, get the visuals of that, smile to them, and then like, yeah, you can shift your energy pretty quickly, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Gratitude lists are
Yeah.
great for that, right? Like I used to think that like, all right, I'm gonna make a gratitude list. And sure, maybe it doesn't bring on this instant relief, but it gets the gears changing in the opposite
100%.
direction. Like
Yeah.
it's slowing down that machine.
Mhm.
And something else that you brought up there too that I forget a lot about is like a lot of this stuff is human nature too. We are
Right.
human
Yeah.
beings. Like take out the addict part of me.
Mhm.
I think like I am a human being. And a lot of this stuff at times I'll chalk up to like, well, I'm an addict and this is a struggle that I have, when, you know, I need to rephrase that, and I'm a human being.
Mhm.
And this is just human nature
Yeah.
that people who aren't in recovery or don't need recovery, that they deal with too.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that we're all just human beings just trying to do our best.
Yeah.
And that I'm a human being. I'm not a robot.
That's right. Yeah, 100%. And again, that's like certain things where you can look back on it and chuckle, right? In the moment, of course, they're incredibly frustrating, you know, and we amplify, or I amplify it. But yeah, I can look back on it now and say, oh, man. And yet I was like, that was where my energy was going for that 5 minutes. I was like, ready to pull my hair out. I was like, I completely shifted into this like state, you know, feeling of like anger and frustration. And you know, I look back on it now, and I know enough about myself. I'm like, oh, man, I'm going to laugh at this, but at the time, I'm so frustrated, right?
Yep.
And yeah, then just like you say too, like again to reiterate, it's like it is just human nature. It's like you know, I think it you know, you always hear about like it goes back to the caveman days. I don't know if it does that far back, but you know, the idea of like your brain is going to always bring up throughout the day things that you've perceived that you've done wrong, whether it's like you said something wrong to that one person that might affect the relationship with them, or the way that they think about you is probably more important, right? The ego side of it. You know, if you did something like unsafe on a bike, or if you're driving, that shit's going to keep cycling through your head, because it's like that was either put you in like a immediate danger, or a perception of immediate danger, or there's a danger of being like kicked out of the tribe because like, again, because of the relationship sort of gone sideways because of something you perceived that you did to this person. So that stuff's always going to be percolating until you can find a way to just resolve it. You know what I mean? And that's where, you know, meditation, and that's where breath work and different modalities such as that come in. Otherwise, that's going to keep sort of fueling you. It's going to be running, like you talking about the gears. It's just going to be sort of running in the the background a lot of the day, right? And then perhaps you're going to be making, decisions with this like pressure or urgency that really doesn't need to be there. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, it's man, the mind is a very, yeah, it's a trip, man. It's like,
It is
to try and, you know what I mean? Just like, obviously we're unpacking it in real time here. But when you're in the moment, man, it can be tricky, can it?
It really can be. And I like that, like I've noticed in myself, I'm able to see some more of this stuff in real time.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is really a gift to the program, and just the work that I've put in, but like realizing these things in real time. And at first it's kind of like, okay, well, that's cool, but I don't know what the fuck to do with it though. Like,
right.
And learning how to adjust and like, apply tools and okay, what do I need to do when this stuff comes up? And great segment, great like transition into this different segment around like breath work.
Yeah.
And I know that you are a breath work guide, so I'd love to hear kind of more of like what you do with that and how you like to apply that to whatever situation you're in.
Definitely. Yeah. Breath work has been a massive, part of and this is recent for me, right? So when I got into coaching, I did a coaching program called Enlifted. So an Enlifted is all about like word choice. So with your inner dialogue and the way that you're choosing to speak to others, and the stories you tell yourself. So it all sort of goes part and parcel, right? Like think of it as like three sides of the same triangle. And yeah, so breathing was a big part of it. I didn't realize how little I was paying attention to my breathing. You know what I mean? To me, it was almost just like my heartbeat. If I would notice it if something was wrong, but other than that, I'm breathing, right? Whereas, man, there's like such an opportunity area, and us as adults, for various reasons, have very much developed like chest breathing, right? Like I think it's something like 80% of adults have some kind of breathing pattern that's not necessarily the best that they can have, right? Like there's some kind of impediment that they have with it. And a lot of it is like this mild or sometimes beyond mild stress response that we keep ourselves in for most of the day, right? And that has a lot to do with like the distractions and the fragmented work and having, too much sensory overload coming at you, too much information coming at you. I think you'll find throughout the course of the day, if anybody's listening to this and hasn't really been paying attention to their breathing, just do it even a couple times today, whether it's put a timer on your phone or just when you're going out for whatever it is, a lunch break or something, just check in with your breathing. And I think you're going to find more often than not, especially in the case of if you're doing a work or parenting or whatever it is, you're going to be in that mild stress response enough that you're going to be doing chest breathing. Your breathing's not getting down into your abdomen. And then that just perpetuates this mild stress response. So I always recommend, at work, if you're at work, at least once an hour, just do like 3 big abdomen breaths, 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out. It really changes the tone of just the way that you're thinking, the way that you're approaching, just everything that's coming at you at that time. And then also when you are in an uncomfortable conversation, make sure to keep your breathing low and slow. And you're going to find that you are far less reactionary because your breath isn't trapped over your chest. Me as well. I did like freeze a lot, and I still do to a degree. So if I have a few different things on the go, I'm about to hop on a call, I'm trying to finish an email, and like my wife's talking to me, I hold my breath, right? And I didn't realize I was doing that. So just breathing through that. So that's the main pattern that I am trying to disrupt for myself is the freeze part. So getting into that low and slow breathing, that's what we say. And when we're doing coaching, that's what I start with. We'll do like 3 minutes of breathing before we start. It helps us tune in together, myself and my client. And and then when we get into the actual stories, because a lot of times it's stories that make you feel uncomfortable, right? So when we get to that stage, what we do is we read them out loud. They type them up on the screen. We're off a Google Doc. And by the time that they're reading it out loud to me, we're breathing between each sentence, because initially it's crazy. The transition between when you read it out loud the first time and I think it's human nature to skip over a sentence that makes you feel uncomfortable. Like you read it very quickly, right? Whereas if you have to read the sentence and then take a big breath after, and then read the next sentence, big breath, and before you know it, man, it's like it's this like pretty powerful transformation. By the time you've read that story with a breath between each sentence, you find that there's like self-forgiveness happens, perhaps even at least empathy towards the other person that you know, perhaps victimized you or whatnot. At least there's like a different understanding of them now. We call it literally airing out your stories, right? And just have like a fresh perspective on it. So like the breath work comes into it as that. And then of course I do like on this community that I'm with, once a month we do like a Sunday breath work where it's just straight up, you know, sound therapy tracks in the background, and I guide them through different breathing techniques. So you actually just get the full on breath work experience too, which is amazing as well for just energy release. I'm sure if you or your listeners are familiar with like the Wim Hof or like the power breathing, or it's almost like that hyperventilation breathing, where it just brings up the massive amounts of energy into your body, and like, you know, different emotions and feelings that they say perhaps have been trapped, haven't really had anywhere to go. And again, it's getting past that whole like needing to like stop them and like interrogate the feeling. Like, why? It's this like ability to have it just come up and out. And then you feel so much lighter and so much better and so much more energetic afterwards. And it's all natural, right? It's something that you can do. You don't need, you know, and I've done plant medicine myself, so I have nothing against that. But like if somebody's a little hesitant about doing like ayahuasca or bufo or something, you can get a lot of different, fairly similar results just from like breathing from some of these like other modalities as well.
Yeah, I know for myself, I've noticed that if I can take that time to take 10 minutes and throw on a meditation and really pay attention and just slow it down, that, man, like today I came into the studio and I've been really just, I've been on go mode. And I was like, okay, I need to just take 10 minutes. Let me lower the lights down. Let me sit on the couch. And as soon as I started hitting that low breathing, like I just start crying, right? Because I got all these feelings and fear going on inside of me that I'm just able to release and to let go. And so, and you know, it's in today's society, so hustle and bustle, busy, you know, you think that, I know that in my mind, I'll be like, well, I don't have time to take 10 minutes to sit down. I like that, what you brought up, that once an hour at work, take, you know, 6 deep abdomen breaths. Like that's easy to do.
Totally, man.
I've got time for that. You know, it doesn't have to be this big drawn out 30, 40 minute, you know, sit down meditation time. It's hey, every hour, 6 deep breaths. Like
totally. I love what you said. You said the magic number there too, like 10 minutes for me. This is a big thing for me as well, as like, so 10 minutes a day is like 1% of your day. So if you look at 10 minutes, we're awake about 1,000 minutes. That's about 17 hours ish. And so 10 minutes is 1% of your day. So certainly people that are like, and it's funny, it goes back to like the whole addiction part. It's like all or nothing. Like for me, when I went to the gym, I'm like, well, I got to go there for 3 hours, 6 times a week. I'm like, no, you don't. You really don't. I didn't need to. So you got to, that's part of that. Like what you're talking about before, like to harken back to some of our previous conversation, you know, it's like, it's just be there to experience it. It doesn't have to be this massive 3-hour epic breath work thing. You can just do 10 minutes. You can do 5 minutes. You can do 3 minutes and just realize, 10 minutes a day is like a big thing for me, because it's like you can come up with a few different habits, whether it's like, so for me, it was like breath work, meditation, and like yoga. 3 things that I normally wouldn't have done because I'm so like action yang. Like I want to be doing stuff, right? And to me, that stuff was like, oh, if I have time for it, I will. And then I completely shifted my mindset on it. And I'm like, no, I don't have, I have all the time in the world to be able to do this. And then just remember 10 minutes a day. If you do that every day for the entire year, that's 61 hours that you've put towards something. So 61 hours of meditation that you otherwise probably wouldn't have done. You know what I mean? Or if you're waiting to find a spot where you can do 2 hours of meditation, I guarantee by the end of the year, it's not going to be 61 hours. So, you know, that little 1% a day, if anybody's into atomic habits, 1% of your day is 10 minutes, if you look at it that way. So 1% better each day. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up as well.
That's I really like the analytics there with that. Right.
Yeah.
And so I need to be careful when I hear those types of things. And I didn't do it this time, but like sometimes when I hear oh, that's only 1% of your day. I'm
Mm,
thinking, and then my mind can go very like very critical, like, come on,
sure.
man, you can't even like that's nothing.
Ah,
You
yeah, yeah,
can't even do that. Like, but
right.
with where I'm at today, I'm thinking more or less like, oh wow, that is obtainable.
Yeah,
And staying away from those old tapes of like, well, you can't even do that. You're not good enough. You're not doing enough.
right,
Which a lot of my stuff can get funneled down into basically that I'm not doing enough because I'm not good enough.
right.
Those very old tapes.
Yeah,
And so one, it was really cool when you brought that up that I was more or less light bulb, not all the lights went dark. The light
yeah,
turned on instead of going dark, and like,
yeah,
oh wow. And then if you look at that, 10 minutes a day, 1% of your day, that's 61 hours over the course of a year. Wow,
yeah,
that's a lot of self-work.
yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. And can fit into really any schedule. Like there's
Hmm.
different ways you can piggyback that with, a drive to work. You know what I mean? Obviously, you're not going to be doing breath work not the best example for that, but whatever it may be, if you're like listening to an audiobook that's self development or something, right? So just finding ways to put it into your already, scheduled time, right? Having said that, like the meditation part in that, as you know, and like what you mentioned, like finding the right setting for that is like so important, right? You're not just going to be like, well, I guess I'll just meditate now. Like you dim the lights. You're intentional about it, right? You're going to get the most out of it at that stage of the game. I want to go back to like just what you mentioned though. Like I hadn't given it that much thought as far as like the derogatory side of what can come of
Mm,
that. Like as far as, which I'm really glad that you brought up. So it's one of the things that we do with the unlifted method is when you speak into like you say, those old tapes where it's just like negations, statements of negation, like
mm,
you can't even do that.
mm,
So the best way to walk out of that is we always just go, okay, well, what can you do? Because like the brain is like that Google engine. You put in the I can't do this, it's just going to bring up a bunch of articles reminding you why you can't do it, versus if you just make that quick little shift into what can you do. And again, like if you're talking about like the control, what isn't within your control, then the Google engine, that being your brain, is going to bring up all the evidence that you need for that as well.
mm.
So as soon as you have a statement of negation, like I can't do this, you're shit talking yourself. I don't do that. I'm always this way, or I'm never that way. Just figure out a quick translation for that. So if you can't do that, what can you do?
Hmm.
And then just ask yourself that and take a breath on it. And so that would be my question for you. Like, what if you can't do the 1% a day? What can you do? And then and it could be something in the ballpark of that. Like, what can you do? And yeah, just what would be something that comes to your mind right away when I say that or ask that question?
What can I do? Go back to that kind of what you mentioned earlier, that during my work day, I can sit down and take 6 abdominal breaths.
Beautiful,
Like,
perfect,
I can do that. I absolutely can
beautiful.
do that.
There you go. And even just the way that I believe you, like I heard that, I heard the way that the inflection in your voice when you said that. So that would be it, man. So if you're, that's like the antidote, if you will, to
Hmm.
some of that stinking thinking, those old patterns, those old tapes when they do come up, because they will. I mean,
Yep.
I still get them. Is just the immediate shift into, okay, well, I can't do that, quote unquote. This, and it's, remember, that's not you. That's just like, like I always call like I just either my evil boss or like we actually had it's called Willie story. So like my middle name's William. My dad's name is Bill. So like that side of me, I call him Willie. He's the guy that's like, yeah, you can't fucking, you know what I mean? This is my dad talking to me essentially, right?
Yep.
So just like kind of removing, it's not me, it's like a pattern, and I've named that pattern. So now it's like my Willie story. So when Willie starts talking, I come up with like a counterpoint to what he says. So he's like, he can't do that. I go, well, I can do this, right? And it might not be exactly what he says I can't do, but it's going to be sort of in that same ballpark, in the same way that you said, well, I can't, if you look at you can't even do 1% a day, but now you can say, well, I can take 6 abdomen breaths in the next hour. And then boom, you're back on track. So that's just a little tip I want to do to just as soon as I hear negations, I'm like, okay, I want to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I appreciate that. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's huge, and I think it's such a simple question. Okay, well, what
Right.
can you do?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, well then, and that enables you to empower yourself.
Yep.
right? It gives you confidence because I can confidently answer that and say, okay, yeah, like maybe 1% doesn't look realistic for my day today.
Yes.
What can I do? Okay, well, I can do this. And okay, that's like you said, in the same ballpark. I'm taking baby steps to get to that 1%. And if
Totally.
I stick with those baby steps and keep asking myself those questions, then I will eventually get to that 1%. And now that's a part of a routine and that's a habit for me. And I
Dude,
feel off when I don't hit that 1% a day.
Dude, you nailed it. 100%. That's exactly what it is, right? Any habit can be like, it can be the simplest thing. Like if you want to get into jogging, put your, running shoes beside the door, and you'll
Yep.
see that enough times. That's step one, right? If, and before you know it, and then just like go for a walk, and then from a walk, maybe, run a little bit at the end, right? Or like the cold shower thing. Like I know it's a big thing right now. I loathe cold showers. So I'm like warming myself up to it. I'll have my normal shower. I'll turn it down to like, I do 10 seconds, right? I wasn't even that. I think it was like 5 seconds the first time, up to 10 seconds. Before you know it, I'm up to 30 seconds. You know what I mean? And just like, everything doesn't have to be this like extreme that us as addicts are used to, right?
Yes.
Totally, dude. Baby steps is exactly the way you articulated is like bang on, 100%.
It's all about the baby steps. Like
It is, man.
the baby steps. It's not the leap. The baby steps will then turn into the leaps and the bounds.
That's right. That's right.
And I think as addicts, like I want to just leap forward. I want to jump and keep jumping and keep leaping. And it's like, let's start with baby steps, man. Let's just start with baby work, baby steps.
Yeah. Baby steps. Yeah. And it's like one of those other things too. Like if you ever see like a picture of it, if you're just taking like the little steps and it's got this like graphic of it over the period of time, like over the course of a year or something, all those steps add up, and all of a sudden you're like way the fuck up here, right? Obviously, anybody that's listening, but either way, like if you see the visual of it, like, yeah, baby steps will accumulate over the course of a year, 2 years, even like 6 months. You're going to be a way different position than you were had you not even done any of those baby steps. It really does add up a lot more than what people think.
Yeah, it really does. I want to talk like about your like the sound therapy side of things.
Yeah, for sure.
And kind of like what goes into that. I apologize, my light turned off, so I'm gonna just.
I noticed that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna turn that. That's on a battery, so that's fun.
Yeah.
But that does not mark the end of the conversation. We're gonna keep going.
Nice.
So I'm definitely interested to, the sound therapy. I can't say that I'm really familiar with that.
Yeah.
So that was definitely one of the things that I wanted to bring up and talk to you, and what that looks like, how that one can incorporate that into their recovery, and kind of like what that looks like.
Definitely, man. Thanks for the opportunity for that. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, definitely I was a musician, have been a musician my whole life. And I found as I got into the recovery coaching part, I'm like, how can I integrate this into my coaching? Because I still obviously love doing music, and it just felt like this other world. And it definitely felt like it was a little bit of my past. You know what I mean? I was playing in like an alt rock band, very like 90s flavor to it, right? Pearl Jam, kind of like all the bands I grew up with, Neil Young, and it's great. But I felt like it was like, I don't know, it's kind of bringing up some of this, like these old patterns in me. Even the way I was writing the songs was very much, sort of like from a victim mentality a little bit, you know what I mean? Because that's how I learned. That's just how I wrote songs. That's how I expressed myself, and identified it as like an opportunity to just evolve and expand. So I got into this whole idea of the sound therapy thing. Like, okay, well, certainly I can bring my musicianship into this different way of being, and I can use this in my coaching as well. So what I got into is like it's there's like it's called the solfeggio frequencies. So there's different frequencies that resonate with different chakras in your body, right? So, and they're whole tones. So for example, if there's like 528 tone, 528 hertz tone, which will resonate. There's a few different ways of different information out there as far as like if that's your heart or your solar plexus chakra, but somewhere in there that tone, when you hear it, has a positive effect on that area in the body. And it sort of goes lower towards your root chakra, and then a higher frequency towards your crown chakra. And with each of those whole tones, so 528 hertz is a C on a piano if the piano is tuned to 444 hertz. I was getting a little bit nerdy, but just you take my word for it. So there's like, it's basically the C note, and then each frequency has a note attached to it. So if you compose music in the key of C over the whole tone, which basically just sounds like a, like the singing bowls that you can have. So if you have that sort of droning frequency that's really healthy to expose the body to, expose, your hearing to, and then you can compose something in the key of C over it, like musically, then all of a sudden you got this like really powerful meditation music that has like this healing tone that's underneath it. Because not everybody likes the healing tones, right? They are a little bit like, some people think it sounds like a little bit like you have tinnitus, like when you have people at home from like a really loud rock concert, and you kind of have that like in your ears. So some people, it reminds them of that. It does make the body, like the sound healing bowls can make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, and I think that's the point. Like, to some people it's like it's really relaxing, and other people they're like, ooh, not for me, right? So it's definitely, it does something to the vibrations that we put off in our body, and like the way that it attunes to everybody. So I love them. I love the whole tones just by themselves, but of course then I get to do my my guitar playing and keyboard and everything else over top of it. So I create these musical compositions over top of the healing tone, and then then it's basically you have like this instrumental meditation music, which I also do. Like my breathwork album I have is basically all these sound therapy compositions that I've made with guided breathwork over top of it, right? So like, okay, for the next 6 seconds, breathe in. So just go through it like that. So there's a lot of different things you can do with it. So I provide it as like instrumentals, so it's just like sound healing to meditate to. I have guided meditations with it. I have guided breathwork sessions with it. So it's really opened this whole new world to me to basically continue, doing all the things I was doing as a musician, but in a completely different modality. And then also bringing that into my coaching for, if somebody's like, hey, I'm having, like there's the throat chakra. And if somebody's like, I'm seeing they're having a hard time articulating themselves or whatnot, I can send them over like something that has like the throat chakra frequency and the composition over that, and maybe some guided, visualizations over how to like, like relax that. And so it's a whole different, element, I guess, to my coaching that I can add. And it was just so beautifully able to, continue using this through line of music that I've had through my whole life.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. That's really interesting stuff. And I'm definitely want to give you an opportunity to plug, where everybody can find all these different things for you.
Yeah,
but man, I think that's so cool that you were able to take what as a musician and go from writing, songs coming from a place of victimization to now you're writing music to heal.
Right.
Like,
right.
Wow, man. Oh my gosh. Wow.
Cool, man.
That is just like really cool, man.
Thanks, dude. Well, it's worth noting too that like for me at the time, articulating myself as like, whether it was like, now I can look back on it and go, yeah, I mean, that sounds pretty victim-y. But that at the time, that was the way that I articulated myself, right? I didn't know I was having a hard time articulating my feelings. I think for guys, I don't generally, but a little bit, right? It's either like not as cool to do it, or like, especially when I was younger, I was just like, no, just walk it off, or don't bring that. So there's so much like emotional phobic, whatever, that it shows up in like workplaces and different things, right? And I found myself that's the way I'd express myself. So at the time, that was healing for me. But to look back on, I was like, oof, a little bit cringy sometimes, right? So I'm like, man, just really like, putting my flag up as I'm the victim here, and thinking that was empowering, and it was, right? But now it also speaks to the growth that I've had as a person. And dude, now just to be able to do it as in healing, I find that's what I listen to now too, right? Is, don't get me wrong, there's for nostalgia, I'll go back and listen to Rage Against the Machine, and
absolutely,
for sure. And I love it. I have utmost respect for their musicianship, but some of these other bands, it's like, man, like listening to like Nirvana, it's kind of painful because the dude, he was an addict and he killed himself, you know what I mean? And that shows up in the music, and everything that you listen to and expose yourself to has that accumulative effect that we've been talking about throughout this conversation.
Oh yeah, I have definitely noticed that So like the music that I listened to pre-recovery, so like I love rap, hip hop, like R&B, that's what I grew up on. Unbeknownst to my parents, of course. Like that was
Right.
not allowed in the household, but
Okay.
you tell me I can't do something, I'm going to go and try and do it because I'm seeing, this had all to do with the religious upbringing that I had. Like
Mm,
this stuff is all a sin. Well, yet I'm seeing people over here that are doing it that aren't burning in hell. So there must be something to it.
right.
So that's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
But I've found that the music that I listen to today is a lot different. Like I still will indulge in some of the rap, but not so hardcore rap because a
Yeah.
lot of it is objectifying women and that gangster lifestyle that I was so attracted to because it had the power and the
Right.
money and the girls, to where now like I'm really a little bit more intentional with like what I'm listening to.
Right.
And so like that's really changed for me. And if I find myself, there's with the awareness that comes to being in recovery, like you see all of these red flags that pop up, right? And it's my choice to either notice them or blow right past them. If I'm in a spot where I'm going back to some of that old music that I'm listening to, okay, boom, that's a red flag.
Mm,
Something's going on with me that is uncomfortable and I don't like where I'm at, and I'm trying to get away from whatever I'm feeling.
yeah.
And back to kind of what you said, I think that one of my goals in all of this is like men's mental health.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I know that it sounds like, we grew up in an era where that was shoved down. To be
Hmm.
a man was to have this big macho exterior. You don't cry, you don't talk about your feelings, you provide. And if you
Hmm.
can't do those things, well, then you're not a man at all.
Right.
And looking back on that, it's like, well, that's all bullshit.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Like, I'm more of a man now than I ever was because I am in touch with my feelings. I do cry. Like, I am able to talk about what's going on with me. And like, I just think that it's so normalized that guys don't talk about their feelings.
Totally, man. Yeah. Really, really important topic, and I think further we get along, in 2023 now, just like the changes in what is considered like a healthy masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
The way I look at it now is like, if people feel safe around me, that's like the ultimate compliment, specifically like with the women in my life. If they feel safe around me, that's like the ultimate compliment I can get. You know what I mean? It's
Mm-hmm.
like, I might not be the toughest guy, like, you know what I mean? But like, I will be able to do what's right in that situation. I've done enough work on myself that I have that vibe about me that I'm like a safe person to be around. I think there's that, and consistency. It's always been but you could say that about men or women, right? Consistency piece. So the safety piece is a big one for me. And yeah, definitely just being able to be vulnerable, realizing that vulnerable doesn't mean weakness,
Yep.
right? There's a different definition of vulnerability, isn't there? And
Mm-hmm.
it's yeah. And so just embracing those two sides of it, to me, that's like a healthy, masculinity, and just being like a consistent person, like not being as wishy-washy and ambiguous as I was before. It's important for me to be able to live with like with gray area, be like, so it isn't like super binary, but also be like committed to like, this is the type of person I'm at. So there is boundaries, for example, that sort of thing. So that's just me sort of riffing on like what my view of, healthy masculinity is for me these days.
Absolutely, man. And I appreciate you sharing that perspective. And I noticed we're a little over kind of the time that we had scheduled. So
Yeah.
I want to be mindful of your time. And man, I just thank you so much for coming on, man. And definitely I want to go ahead and I want to give you, and I'll post your links in the description when I post this episode, but I want to give you a chance to just, tell everybody where they can go find you, where they can find what you're doing and everything like that.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate our conversation today, and like really love the vibe of your show and what you're doing here. So
Thank
really
you.
thanks to you and your listeners. And I really appreciate your time today. And dude, that went by so quick, didn't it? It
I
felt
did.
like,
Oh man, I went
right?
like that.
I was like, I looked at the time, I'm like, holy crap, that went by fast. Yeah. So dude, again, appreciate you. And yeah, you can find me at recoveryroadmap.me. So that's my Instagram handle, my TikTok channel, and my website. So that's recoveryroadmap.me. I'm also at Matt Gardiner Live. So that's my YouTube channel, which has just a mixture of all the different things I've been talking about. So it has my sound therapy, breath work, some coaching, all the different podcasts and such as well. And that's also so Matt Gardiner Live's my YouTube channel also happens to be my Facebook page, which is just sort of my, I guess, the coaching page, if you will, as well. So recoveryroadmap.me, Matt Gardiner Live.
And then the podcast is Recovery Roadmap, isn't it?
It was actually called Beyond Recovery.
Beyond, that's it. I apologize.
No, it's all good. It's all good. That one's actually winding down. So I've been working with a recovery. So like we like to, instead of, we're just starting to shy away from the sobriety part and just start saying like the non-drinking part. Mm-hmm. So a non-drinking coach, I guess, community that we're doing. So it's myself and 2 others. And we just started a new podcast called Freedom from Alcohol. So we're about 3 episodes in at time.
Awesome.
Here. So that's what I'm sort of transitioning into. But yeah, Beyond Recovery is still available on all the streaming platforms. I've had some amazing interviews over the last 1.5 years. So really great stuff there. And then I'll plug Freedom from Alcohol as well as the new podcast I'm a part of.
Awesome. Well, Matt, again, man, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed this conversation. I got a lot out of it, man. And it was just fun. I really enjoy having these kinds of conversations, man. Like they're so useful and helpful, and it's great to get other perspectives.
Yeah, dude, mirror 100% back to you, and really appreciate your time and love what you're doing here. And yeah, I could do this kind of thing all day. So I really appreciate it.
Oh man. Well, hey, you're welcome back on the podcast anytime that you want to come back on. I'll definitely be having you back on and touching base with you. So we'll definitely stay connected, man. And thank you again for joining No Lions here, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks to you, and thanks to all your listeners. Have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Have a good one, brother. I'll talk to you later.
You bet.
Bye.
Bye.
Big shout out to Matt. Thank you so much for coming on the show and just having a conversation with me. You know, whether your addiction is alcohol or drugs or sex, I think a lot of us can relate to just those underlying stories. And the way that we overcome those is all looks a little bit different, is kind of we touched on in that conversation. So again, thank you so much, Matt, for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Everybody make sure to go check out, the things that he's doing. Go give him a follow and a like. His handle is Recovery Roadmap _me. Again, that is Recovery Roadmap _me. And I'll be posting these in the description. So definitely go check out everything that he's doing, from the sound therapy to some of the breathwork stuff. Great stuff that he's doing. So just really appreciate, again, him coming on. And while you guys are out there, go check out the No Lions Here social media. On YouTube, it is no_lions_here. That's also the same for Instagram. And just keep supporting, guys. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation as much as I enjoyed being a part of it. Thank you guys so much for listening to No Lions Here, and I really appreciate the support. It means the world to me, so thank you so much. And as always, keep coming back. It works if you work it, and you're worth it. I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Ja, nou, zoiets.